first day here, and it's my first full day in the Netherlands. And so there's a number of things I want to do while I'm here. And one of the first things I want to do is explore the whole notion of 17th century Dutch masters art. And that's a big deal here. There's art galleries everywhere, and one about 150 steps away from here, which I'll be going to later today, called Moritz House. And so I'll be going to see that and report on that. And other things I want to do while I'm, well, in this part of the country anyway, is to, well, look at the architecture, enjoy the food. In Netherlands, they have these windmills that are part of the scenery here. So I want to check those out and see how it is, how that works, that they move water from one level to another level and drive back the sea. I guess that's what they've done. And so that's a pretty good invention. And so I want to explore that and see how that works. I'm sitting in a restaurant right now. It's early, no, not early, 10:30. I guess that's early here because I'm the only one in this restaurant right now. And but anyway, the first thing I want to do and talk about is this whole business of 7th century Dutch masters art. So on this business of art, I guess the first thing I've come to learn is that art, no matter, I don't know if you can hear those trolleys going by. First thing I've come to learn is that art, no matter when it was made, has got a message behind it. And that was true in the year 125 AD or 1225 or 2025. And so there's always a message, underlying kind of theme and narrative that is contained in the art. And so I want to explore that a little bit, and in particular, how that came to be and what that message is, and how that 17th century came to be such a prominent time and a golden age for art here in this part of the world. So if we go back to early Christendom, and I won't make this too long. There was most of the art at that time was religious art, and the Church of Rome, the Catholic Church, was probably the biggest institution in Europe, biggest and most powerful institution in Europe. And so then it used art as a way to educate, indoctrinate people in teachings of the church. And the main idea there was that you boys and girls, you do what the church tells you, and don't step out of line, and give lots of money to the church. And even though you might be having a miserable life right now, your reward is coming. It might be after you die, but your reward is still coming. And the art of that time would have shown what that reward is going to be, i.e., there's going to be up in heaven, there are angels and saints and cherubs and golden streets and whatnot. And so if you play your cards right, after you die, you're going to be up there carousing with the angels up in heaven, and it's all going to be good. But on the other hand, if you don't toe the line, yeah, there's also images of what could happen the other way if that doesn't work out for you. So that was one of the first messages that you found in art. So during that first millennium, that was a strong message, and with the general view being that there was a supreme being that kind of ran everything, and you had to please that being in order to make things work out for you after you die. And so that message held sway for quite a long time, till, you know, the end of the first millennium and into 11, 1200s, whatever. And then this little thing called the Renaissance came along, and there was a new way of thinking about life and people and everything. And so the Renaissance man was one who determined that he had control he or she had control of their lives and could do things and decide things and build things and make a life for themselves. And it was a more humanistic approach to view of the world. And so then that held sway. And around about that time also, there was a return to the literature of the early Greeks and Romans, and the quest for knowledge and science and anatomy and exploration and so on. So this was just the start of new things after pretty long dark time in European people's history. And that Renaissance ironically started in Italy, actually, the Italian Renaissance, 1400, something like that. And so then that whole notion grew and it became a stronger thing. And lots of other things happened in the 1400s. Columbus discovered the New World, and that sparked off a whole new global trade and trading and travel. And around about that same time, the Gutenberg printing press was invented. And so that had a huge difference in that people could read books and have access to books and have access to the Bible and other things. And so then that made a huge difference, because up until then, well, as I said earlier, art was the medium and the message. Well, now people could actually read things for themselves, and so that prompted a whole different thing of request for knowledge and science and so on. And then the other little thing that happened a little bit after that, 1500 or so, was the Reformation. And that really threw a spanner into the whole notion of the church being all powerful. And Martin Luther in 1500s thereabouts started the Reformation, and he challenged one of the sources I read said that he was the religious whistleblower. I think it's an apt name, because then what he did is he called into question the abuses and corruption in the church and the authority of the Pope. And so then the Reformation people really had a thing about the whole business of selling of indulgences, and this went on for a long time. And so as people were able to have Bibles and read them, they read the Bible and said, hey, wait a minute, there's nothing in here that says you can do that, pay money and be forgiven for your sins and make a better deal in your afterlife. And so then they had to acknowledge that and say, yeah, that's not really a thing. We stopped doing that. And so I would call that a con job and a scam of biblical proportions. And so then they brought an end to that. And one of the odd things is that the Gutenberg press, one of the first books that were printed was the Bible, but the second one was they would print these sheets of indulgence that says, okay, you've been relieved of your sins for so much money, and so they cranked these out and sold them, and so that was like a pretty bad scam as far as I can see. But anyway, that came to an end. And but with that Reformation, then that also sparked, a good 100 years of warring between the Catholics and the Protestants and the Reformers. And so then that went on for a long time and caused quite a bit of turmoil. And during that time also nation states developed and built into countries and so on. So that was a big thing. The other thing I forgot to mention is that when the Renaissance first started, and the importance of the individual and man and so on, that again was reflected in the art. And so then you had Michelangelo's David and Botticelli, the Birth of Venus. And so then they not idolized, but celebrated the individual. And they did that by by having these absolutely perfect human forms like Michelangelo's David and other art, and it was just like godly perfection actually. But anyway, it was art, and it had the message that says, yeah, individuals are important and are the most the most important thing in life is the life of the individual. So, and then we come to, well, let's jump ahead to the 17th century, which was want to get to in Netherlands anyway, and throughout Europe, there was major prosperity happening, and there was global trade and colonization and education and science and everything was it was the golden era for everything. And so it was in that kind of context that in the Netherlands anyway, then the art actually also reflected that. And the other thing I forgot to mention is that when there was religious art, it was commissioned by the church, and so the church could afford to hire artists to paint the Sistine Chapel and do all of these kind of things. And of course, individual people could no way do that. But by the 17th century, there was a whole new prosperity, and there in Holland and other countries also, there was a merchant class and a middle class, and that was growing, and they were achieving and having a good life. And so what they wanted also was to have art that reflected them. I want to interject here and make a point that I forgot to mention earlier, which is important, and that is that after the Reformation, the southern European countries mostly stayed with the Catholic Church, i.e., Italy, France, Spain, so on. But the some of the northern countries like Holland and Germany, they went with the Reform option. And the reformers had a real thing about art, and in particular the religious art of the Catholic churches, and they were totally opposed to the grandeur and opulence and so on of the religious art that was found in churches and so on. They took that as idol worship, and so they didn't agree with that at all. And so their churches were very plain and didn't have all that kind of art. And so hence also the art that was generated in those countries then was more of a secular art of domestic things, and that will become quite evident as we look at the art of that period. And so instead of having a statue of David in his full perfection, then they wanted to have art that reflected people who they were. And so the 17th century art is of ordinary people. And you see people, women pouring milk from a can, or kitchen scenes, or still lifes of stuff on the table, and just things around their home. And the message around all of this was that, hey, there is value in us and what we're doing in our homes. All of this is important to us, and we achieved this, and we built this, and we've done this, and so we want this reflected in the art that we have in our homes. And at that time also, the art pieces were smaller so that you could hang it in your house, as opposed to like huge, massive works of art. And so then, instead of angels and Madonnas up in heaven, you have, potato peelers and workers and field workers and ordinary people and sailors depicted in the art. And that's what people used to adorn their houses with. And not only to adorn their houses with, but to also give the message that, yeah, we've done things, we've achieved, we've built, we're proud of what we have, and be that landscapes or still lifes or whatever. And so then that just reflected who they were and the importance of everything that they've done and achieved. I'll check to see how much time I've used up so far talking about all of this, and because the next thing I want to do is go to this museum called Moritz House Museum, and it has a pretty interesting and storied and complicated background, and so I'll either do that now, or just close off and start a new video for that. So anyway, stand by. This is a photo of the Mauritshuis Museum in The Hague, Netherlands, and I'll make a fresh video of my tour of this museum. And this, incidentally, is where the girl with the pearl earring is hung, so make sure to come back and watch for that. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.